Janet's voice was still ringing in my ears the night she screamed, "You're ungrateful. Get out and never come back." I didn't argue. I just stepped outside as the door slammed behind me. 6 months later, my phone buzzed with a message from Ray. "When are you sending the mortgage payment for this month?" I stared at the screen, anger and disbelief twisting together. They'd thrown me out, yet still expected my money. I grew up believing that being the strong one was something to be proud of, even when it was just another way of saying no one was going to look out for me. Janet used to tell people, "Harper never needs anything," as if that were a compliment. Meanwhile, Colin, 2 years older, endlessly celebrated, was the child who got everything without needing to lift a finger. He had a bright, neatly decorated room upstairs, complete with posters, a desk, and a window overlooking the backyard. I slept in the basement, on a futon next to the washing machine, because "you're tough, you'll be fine down there." The pattern didn't stop as we got older, it calcified. Colin was enrolled in art classes, summer camps, creative programs, all paid for without hesitation. I wanted to play basketball, but every time I asked, Janet would shrug and say, "If you can get a scholarship, go for it." So I did, washing cars, babysitting, running errands, anything to afford registration fees. Even then, she'd tell relatives how Colin is the artistic one and Harper is our practical girl, as if practicality wasn't born from necessity. My birthday became another quiet reminder of where I stood. Colin's celebrations were extravagant themes, pirate ships, superheroes, backyard carnivals. Mine? Always merged into something else. "We'll just combine it with Colin's party this year," Janet would say, handing me a slice of leftover cake. I told myself I didn't mind. I learned early that expecting anything made disappointment sharper. When adulthood came, I thought maybe the imbalance would fade. It didn't. If anything, it deepened into something heavier, something transactional. After Ray's heart surgery, I didn't hesitate to help. I covered the medical bills their insurance didn't, because I believed that taking care of family meant something. I paid the phone bill just for a month, which became 5 years. The car insurance they couldn't manage right now quietly fell onto my plate too. Colin spiraled through his second failed startup, calling it a temporary setback. Janet cried on the phone, insisting he just needed one last push. "You're doing so well, Harper. Can't you help your brother? He's chasing his dream." I transferred the money, though it was more than half my savings at the time. No one thanked me. In fact, the next time we saw each other, Colin joked that he'd pay me back when the company goes public, like the whole thing was a cute family anecdote. Despite all this, I kept telling myself it was normal. That this was what good daughters did. That family mattered more than fairness. I held on to those ideas so tightly they became part of my identity: Harper, the dependable one. Harper, the problem solver. Harper, the financial safety net. But over the last 2 years, something shifted. Janet and Ray called less. They stopped inviting me for dinner. They never asked how I was doing, how work was going, whether I was happy. The only time my phone lit up with their names was when a bill was late or they needed a small favor. I'd visit for holidays and feel like a guest in my childhood home, watching them dote on Colin, listening to them brag about his resilience while ignoring everything I'd quietly carried for them. The more I tried to connect, the more invisible I felt. If I didn't send money, texts became colder. If I didn't answer immediately, Janet would guilt-trip me with long messages about how family shouldn't have to beg. I don't think they noticed when I stopped showing up on weekends. I don't even think they noticed when I started pulling away emotionally. Somewhere along the line, I realized I could vanish completely, and they wouldn't miss me, only the money I sent. That truth hurt more than any argument, any forgotten birthday, any basement bedroom. It was the moment I finally admitted to myself what I had refused to see: they didn't value me. They valued what I could give. And I had given more than enough. I didn't confront Janet right away. For a long time, I tried to swallow the resentment and convince myself I was imagining things. But it built, slowly and steadily, like water behind a dam. One afternoon, after another ignored text and another reminder to transfer money for a small bill, I finally asked her the question that had been sitting in my chest for years. "Mom, did you ever notice how different things were for Colin and me growing up?" She didn't even look up from the laundry she was folding. "What are you talking about?" "I mean, he always had everything. Classes, his own room, new clothes. I had to work for everything I got. I never even had a real birthday party." Janet scoffed. "You remember things wrong, Harper. You always were dramatic." It was the first time I felt something break inside me, not a crack, but a clean snap. "I'm not remembering wrong," I insisted. "You treated us differently." She shrugged. "You were stronger. Colin was sensitive. We gave him what he needed. And you turned out fine, didn't you?" There it was, the gaslighting layered under a disguised compliment. When Ray chimed in from the couch with, "Family is about sacrifice." "Maybe you're forgetting that," I felt my throat tighten. Word spread quickly through the extended family that I had accused my parents of unfairness. Suddenly my aunt and 2 cousins were calling me ungrateful. One of them even said, "You make good money now. Don't forget where you came from." As if my childhood had been some kind of blessing they wanted credit for. The following month, I decided to stop sending money, not permanently, just until I could catch my breath. 3 days later, Janet called, her voice sharp enough to cut through the phone. "Why didn't you pay the phone bill?" she demanded. "Because I never agreed to pay it forever. I just helped when you needed it." "We do need it," she snapped. "And you know that." Before I could answer, Colin texted me. "The family has sacrificed too much for you. It's your turn. Don't be selfish." My turn. As if I hadn't spent years quietly covering emergencies, debts, and unpaid bills. As if every birthday hunched in a basement didn't count. The blowout came that weekend. I went to their house hoping to talk things out, but Janet was already furious, pacing the living room, red-faced. "You embarrassed this family," she shouted the moment I walked through the door. "Complaining to people, refusing to help us when we're struggling. What kind of daughter does that make you?" "One who's tired," I said quietly. "Tired of being taken for granted. Tired of pretending everything was fair when it wasn't." Ray pointed at me like I was a stranger. "If you don't want to be part of this family, then leave." "Robert," Janet hissed, "don't." But she didn't stop him. And she didn't look at me with anything close to love. I grabbed my jacket, heart pounding. "Fine," I whispered. "If you want me gone, I'll go." Janet slammed the door behind me so hard the porch windows shook. Her final words rang in my ears like a curse: "Don't come back asking for anything." Except the irony was immediate. 6 months went by, and I slowly rebuilt a life of my own, quiet, small, but mine. Then one morning, my phone lit up with a message from Ray. "When will you pay the mortgage?" "It's late." I read it twice, thinking it had to be a joke. They'd kicked me out, erased me, shamed me, yet somehow still expected money from me. My hands shook with something between disbelief and fury. That was the moment everything clicked. They didn't want me. They wanted what I provided. And standing in my small apartment, staring at that message, I felt myself reach the very edge of what I could tolerate. This was the moment the dam finally gave way. The moment Harper Cole stopped being the strong one they could depend on, and started being the strong one for herself. I finally told Lena everything one night over takeout, every insult, every bill, every time my parents made me feel like my only value was what I could pay for. I expected her to tell me I was overthinking it, that things would get better. Instead, she put her fork down and looked straight at me. Harper, they don't want you. They want your wallet. I felt myself flinch. Hearing it out loud was different. It was like someone turning on a light in a room I'd been sitting in for years without realizing it was dark. Lena leaned in. Check your credit report. Just humor me. I didn't want to. I was afraid of what I'd find. But that night, sitting alone at my kitchen table, I pulled up the report, and my stomach dropped. There was a loan for $10,000 under my name. A loan I had never applied for. The signature on the application looked like mine, almost. Close enough to fool a bank, not close enough to fool me. The listed contact person was Janet. The beneficiary account belonged to Ray. My hands went cold. My parents hadn't just used me. They'd stolen from me, literally. I called Lena in a panic. She didn't hesitate. Get a lawyer. Now. That's how I ended up in the office of Mr. Hollis, a calm, precise attorney who listened without interrupting. When I showed him the paperwork, he frowned and immediately requested a deeper pull of my credit history. 2 days later, he called me back in. There weren't just 1 or 2 loans. There were 3. All in my name. All forged. All routed to accounts belonging to Janet or Ray. He laid the documents in front of me like pieces of a puzzle that finally made a picture I didn't want to see. Miss Cole, he said gently, this is not a misunderstanding. This is identity fraud. And based on the pattern, it's been happening for years. Years. They'd been doing this for years. It was never just about Colin. Never just about favoritism. Never just about me being the strong one. It was a system, one they counted on me never questioning. I stared at the stack of papers, a decade of quiet exploitation compressed into ink and signatures that weren't mine. For the first time, I didn't feel confused or guilty. I didn't feel like a bad daughter for doubting my family. I felt clarity. Pure, cold, undeniable clarity. They hadn't raised a daughter. They'd grown a resource. And they expected me to keep functioning as their financial safety net forever. But something in me shifted the moment that truth settled in. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't confused. And I wasn't going to wait for them to take anything else from me. I looked at Mr. Hollis and said the words I had never imagined saying. I'm ready to confront them. For the first time in my life, I meant it. I scheduled the meeting for a Saturday afternoon, the only day I knew all of them would be available. When they walked into the small conference room at Mr. Hollis's office, they looked confused, irritated, almost inconvenienced. Janet sat down with her arms crossed, Ray paced near the window, and Colin slouched in a chair like a bored teenager. I took a deep breath. Thank you for coming. Ray snorted. Just tell us when you're sending the mortgage payment. This is ridiculous. Mr. Hollis slid a folder onto the table. We'll start with this. I opened it and pulled out the first document. This is a loan taken out in my name. I laid down the second. Here's another. Then the third. And another. All signed with my forged signature. Janet's face drained of color. Harper, sweetheart, your mother just borrowed it temporarily. We needed help. Help? I repeated. Without asking me? Without telling me? She burst into tears. You're being selfish. Family shares burdens. Ray slammed his fist onto the table. We fed you. We raised you. You owe us. You were born a responsibility of this family. Mr. Hollis cleared his throat. Mr. Stevens, these loans constitute identity fraud. It's a serious federal offense. Colin immediately pointed at Janet. It was Mom's idea. Janet whipped her head toward him. Don't you dare put this on me. Your father said she'd never find out. Ray barked, watch your mouth, Janet, and before long they were all yelling over each other, blame ricocheting across the room, panic spreading like wildfire. I waited. I let them spiral. Then I spoke. And they actually went silent. Here, I said, placing a stack of bank statements on the table, are the thousands of dollars I've sent you over the years. Every hospital bill. Every phone plan. Every emergency. Every bailout. I looked each of them in the eyes. I have done more for this family than anyone in this room. And do you know what I got in return? You kicked me out. You told me to leave and never come back. Janet's crying turned theatrical. I was upset. You know how I get when I'm emotional. Ray barked, stop being dramatic, Harper. You're making this bigger than it is. I stood up. No. I'm making it honest. My hands were steady. My voice didn't shake. I don't owe any of you a single thing. The person who threw me out was you, Mom. The person who stole my identity was you, Ray. And the person who let it happen was you, Colin. Ray's face twisted into something dark. He took a step toward me, hand raised like he might actually hit me. I didn't flinch. I simply stepped back and nodded toward Mr. Hollis. The attorney stood immediately. Touch her, and this becomes a criminal assault case on top of everything else. Ray froze, hand trembling. For the first time in my life, he was the one who looked afraid. I gathered the documents back into the folder, slid it under my arm, and walked toward the door. No tears. No second thoughts. At the threshold, I looked back at the three people who had spent years calling themselves my family. They looked small, panicked, cornered, and powerless. I'm done, I said quietly. Whatever consequences come next, they belong to you, not me. Then I walked out, letting the door click shut behind me, soft, final, absolute. They stayed inside, stunned into silence. And for the first time in my life, I left on my own terms. The fallout was quieter than I expected, but it was relentless. Within 3 weeks, Ray received a formal notice that he was under investigation for financial misconduct tied to the fraudulent loans. Mr. Hollis had warned me that identity theft rarely existed in isolation, and he was right. Investigators uncovered inconsistencies in Ray's tax filings, missing community fund records, and years of financial shortcuts finally catching up to him. Meanwhile, the house that Janet once proudly guarded like a trophy began slipping through their fingers. Without my payments propping them up, the mortgage fell behind almost immediately. I heard, through a cousin who still couldn't mind her own business, that foreclosure warnings had started arriving in thick white envelopes. For the first time in my life, Janet wasn't angry, she was overwhelmed. Colin, stripped of the endless safety net his parents had always stretched beneath him, was forced to face reality too. His creative pursuits dried up when there was no longer anyone to fund them. He took a job at a warehouse outside town, honest work, something he had never needed to do before. I didn't feel satisfaction hearing it, but I didn't feel guilt either. It was simply the consequence of a world that had stopped cushioning him. As for me, my life shifted in ways I didn't expect. Without the emotional drain of constant demands or the financial pressure of supporting an entire household, I had more room, mentally, financially, spiritually, to breathe. I focused on my work with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. My manager even pulled me aside one afternoon and said, "I don't know what changed, Harper, but your performance is exceptional lately." 2 months later, I was promoted. No strings attached. No manipulations. No guilt. With the raise, I moved into a new apartment, bright, open, and filled with an unfamiliar kind of quiet. Not the suffocating silence of being ignored, but the peaceful kind that comes from being free. I bought furniture I actually liked. I decorated the walls with photos from trips I finally allowed myself to take. And for the first time, when I woke up in the morning, the future felt like mine. Not borrowed. Not demanded. Mine. I realized something simple but life-changing. I had spent so many years trying to earn a place in a family that was never willing to make space for me. Walking away didn't make me cruel. It made me whole. In the end, I realized something I wish I had understood years earlier: revenge isn't always about striking back. Sometimes it's simply walking away and letting people face the consequences of the choices they made. Family only means something when there is respect on both sides. Without that, it's just a word people hide behind. And if you've ever been treated like a burden or an ATM, please hear me when I say this: you are not alone, and you are not wrong for wanting more. If my story resonated with you, share it, leave a comment, and subscribe for more family revenge stories. You deserve a life built on real love, real accountability, and real peace.